That is where men like you belong. Read. On the floor. The words cut through Harbor Light Cafe, just as Nathan Reed hit the edge of table 7, and one paper cup of hot coffee tipped over, spilling across the worn wooden floor like a dark stain spreading through the room. His daughter Sophie froze beside her little backpack, one purple crayon rolling from her hand and stopping near the polished heel of Audrey Blake, the woman everyone in the room suddenly recognized, but no one dared greet too loudly. Audrey Blake, Chief Executive Officer of Blake Hospitality Group, had just stepped into the cafe with 2 assistants, a security officer, and a contract cold enough to change the future of the entire block. She had come to measure walls, counters, profit margins, and weaknesses. She had not come to watch a grown man get humiliated in front of his child. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now, back to Nathan Reed. The man who pushed him was Travis Boone, Regional Development Manager, expensive watch, perfect haircut, smile sharp enough to make kindness feel foolish. He stood over Nathan with one hand still raised, not in defense, but in performance, as though the cafe were a stage and everyone else had paid to watch him win. Get up, Travis said, or stay down. Either way, people like you are the reason places like this fail. A few customers shifted in their seats. Someone near the window lifted a phone, then lowered it again. Behind the counter, Megan Porter pressed both hands against her apron, her face pale with the kind of fear workers learn to hide when rent is due on Friday. Martha Keller, the cafe's owner, looked like she wanted to speak, but years of bills, repairs, and threats had taught her that some men enjoyed crushing voices more than answering them. Nathan did not rush to his feet. He did not swing. He did not shout. He turned first toward Sophie, because that was who he was before he was anything else. A father. A tired father, maybe. A poor father. Certainly. But not a broken one. Coffee dripped from the sleeve of his faded denim jacket. The room smelled of cinnamon rolls, rainwater, and burnt espresso from the old machine coughing behind the counter. Outside, October rain tapped against the glass in soft, nervous rhythms. Inside, Travis laughed once, loud enough to invite others to join him. Nobody did. Nathan reached down, picked up Sophie's purple crayon, wiped it carefully with his thumb, and placed it back in her small hand. Look at me, sweetheart, he said, his voice low and steady. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she looked. A man can fall without becoming low. The sentence did not sound like a comeback. It sounded like a prayer spoken by someone who had survived worse rooms than this one. Audrey Blake, who had built a career on reading people in less than 30 seconds, felt something in the cafe change. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Travis took a step closer, irritated by the silence he had not ordered. You think that sounds noble? He snapped. Nathan rose slowly, one palm on the table, the other still open where Sophie could see it. No fists. No threat. Just quiet control. The old espresso machine hissed behind him like it was holding its breath. Audrey's security officer, Owen Pierce, moved half an inch forward, then stopped. He had seen fear before. He had seen anger. But the look in Nathan Reed's eyes was neither. It was discipline. It was restraint. It was dignity standing up in a wet jacket, while a whole cafe suddenly forgot how to breathe. For several seconds, nobody moved, and in that silence Harbor Light Cafe revealed what it had always been. Not a business waiting to be measured by a corporate clipboard, but a small shelter with scratched tables, mismatched chairs, and names remembered better than orders. Nathan Reed stood near table 7 with coffee drying on his sleeve, but every person in that room had seen him there before in quieter moments, long before Audrey Blake arrived with her polished coat and unreadable eyes. They had seen him at 6:15 in the morning, kneeling behind the counter with a flashlight between his teeth, trying to coax life out of the espresso machine Martha Keller could not afford to replace. They had seen him carry flour from the delivery truck when the driver left it by the curb in the rain. They had seen him fix the loose front door that used to swing open whenever the wind came hard off the bay. He never made a speech about it. He never handed anyone a bill unless Martha insisted. He simply showed up, sleeves rolled, hands steady, as if service were not something to announce, but something to become. You should charge me proper, Nathan, Martha had told him that morning, her gray hair pinned crooked from another sleepless night. I will, he had answered, tightening a copper fitting beneath the old machine. 1 cup of coffee and no lecture. Martha had tried to smile, but the numbers in her eyes were heavier than the joke. Rent was late. The insurance payment was worse. The letter from Blake Hospitality Group sat behind the register in a white envelope, offering a buyout that sounded generous only if you did not understand what it meant to lose the last place in town where lonely people were still greeted by name. At the corner table, Sophie had been coloring her school assignment, a drawing titled My Safe Place, pressing her crayon so carefully that the paper wrinkled beneath her small hand. She had drawn the cafe windows glowing yellow, Martha behind the counter, Megan balancing a tray, and Nathan standing by the door like he was making sure the whole world behaved before it came inside. Megan Porter had noticed and laughed softly. Your dad looks like a security guard. Sophie did not look up. He is not a guard. He is just safe. Nathan had heard that from under the counter, and for one breath his wrench stopped moving. The rain had begun after lunch, soft at first, then harder, bringing in customers who shook water from umbrellas and ordered soup, black coffee, and second chances disguised as ordinary meals. That was when Travis Boone arrived, not through the door like a customer, but through the room like a warning. He inspected the cracked tile, the aging menu board, the tired faces, and finally Megan, whose hands trembled when he asked why the display case looked half empty. Because we sold the morning batch, she said. Then make it look full, Travis replied. People do not invest in empty. Nathan looked up from the espresso machine. He said nothing yet, but the cafe felt him notice. And sometimes, with men like Nathan Reed, being noticed was the first quiet form of protection. Travis Boone had not come alone. He had come 15 minutes ahead of Audrey Blake, which meant every insult he spoke carried the confidence of a man arranging the room before the person with power arrived. He walked past the counter, tapped one finger against the old pastry case, and smiled at Martha as though her whole life were an inconvenience on his schedule. This is exactly what I told corporate, he said. Sentimental, outdated, inefficient. Martha folded her hands in front of her apron. This cafe has served this neighborhood for 29 years. Travis glanced around at the chipped mugs, the raincoats hanging from chair backs, the elderly man reading a newspaper by the window. And that is why it looks 30 years tired. Megan lowered her eyes. Nathan rose from behind the espresso machine with a small screwdriver in one hand, grease along his knuckles, and the quiet expression of a man measuring whether a word would help or only feed the fire. Travis saw him and smirked. Still playing Repairman Reed? I thought Martha had standards. Nathan set the screwdriver on a folded towel. The machine needed a new seal. The whole place needs a new owner. The front bell chimed before anyone could answer, and the cafe seemed to inhale all at once. Audrey Blake stepped inside with rain shining on the shoulders of her cream-colored coat, her dark blonde hair pinned smooth, her face calm in the way expensive boardrooms teach people to be calm. 2 assistants followed with tablets. Owen Pierce came last, broad-shouldered, watchful, holding the door just long enough for the wind to push in the smell of wet pavement and fallen leaves. Travis changed instantly. His back straightened. His voice warmed. His cruelty put on a suit. Ms. Blake, he said, crossing the room. Welcome to Harbor Light. I apologize for the condition. As you can see, the property has potential, but the current operation is struggling. Audrey did not smile. She scanned the cafe like a woman trained to find weakness in silence. Her eyes touched the water stain on the ceiling, the uneven floorboard near the counter, the tired register, then Nathan's worn jacket and work boots. To her, in that first narrow glance, he looked like part of the decay Travis had described in his reports. Another local problem, another emotional complication, another man with sad eyes standing between progress and profit. Sophie watched Audrey from the corner table, her purple crayon hovering above the page. Audrey noticed the child staring, and, perhaps because children were harder to read than contracts, she stepped closer. What are you drawing? Sophie turned the paper slightly. It showed the cafe in bright yellow, but Audrey herself stood near the door with a crown cracked down the middle. One assistant gave an awkward little cough. Audrey's eyebrows lifted. Is that supposed to be me? Sophie nodded. Nathan said gently, Sophie. But Audrey raised one hand, not offended, only curious. Why is the crown broken? Sophie looked at the drawing, then at Audrey's perfect coat, perfect posture, Perfect loneliness. Because pretty things can still look lonely. For the first time since she entered, Audrey Blake had no immediate answer. Audrey Blake looked at Sophie's drawing longer than anyone expected, and for a moment the cafe held a strange, fragile grace, as if one child's honest sentence had placed a hand on the shoulder of a woman who had forgotten she was allowed to be human. Then Travis Boone laughed. Not loudly at first, just enough to break the spell. "Kids say the funniest things," he said, stepping between Audrey and the table as if blocking sunlight from reaching a seat. "Her father lets her spend too much time around adult problems." Nathan's face did not change, but his eyes moved from Travis to Sophie, and Sophie quietly pulled her drawing closer to her chest. Audrey noticed that. She also noticed how Travis smiled at her, but frightened everyone else. The old espresso machine gave a tired hiss behind the counter, and Megan Porter turned too quickly. With a tray of fresh coffee cups, one saucer slipped, tapped the counter, and rolled to the floor without breaking. It was a small mistake, the kind that happens in every cafe in America before the lunch rush is over. Travis made it sound like a crime. "Unbelievable," he snapped. Megan bent down at once. "I am sorry. I will get it." "Do not apologize to the floor," Travis said. "Apologize to Ms. Blake. She is here to decide whether this place deserves saving, and you are showing her exactly why it does not." Megan stood slowly, her cheeks burning. The customers looked away in that painful way good people sometimes do when they are ashamed of their own fear. Martha opened her mouth. Travis pointed at her without even turning. "Do not. You have done enough by hiring people who panic over dishes." Megan swallowed hard and faced Audrey. "Ms. Blake, I am sorry." Her voice trembled on the last word. Nathan stepped forward then, not fast, not dramatic, just one quiet step that placed him beside Megan instead of behind her. "She did not drop the saucer," he said. Travis turned, delighted to have the target he preferred. "Excuse me. The counter edge is uneven," Nathan said, tapping the warped wood lightly with 2 fingers. "I told you that yesterday when you leaned on it and cracked the brace." Travis's smile thinned. "Careful, Reed." Nathan picked up the saucer, wiped it with a clean towel, and set it gently near the sink. Truth does not become disrespect just because it arrives from someone you look down on. The cafe went very still. 3 short breaths passed. Megan looked at Nathan. Martha looked at the floor. Audrey looked at Travis. Outside, rain streaked down the windows like silver threads, and the yellow light above the counter flickered once, making the room feel older, smaller, more honest. Travis stepped close enough that his expensive cologne covered the smell of coffee. "You think this is your moment?" he said. "No," Nathan answered. "I think it is hers." He nodded toward Megan. "Let her work." That was all. No insult. No challenge. No performance. But it struck Travis harder than shouting would have, because Nathan had refused the one thing bullies need most. He refused to be afraid in public. Travis's jaw tightened. He looked toward Audrey, then the assistants, then the phones half raised around the room, and pride made the decision wisdom would not. "Men like you always want to play noble," he said, and with one sharp motion, he shoved Nathan back into table 7. The coffee cup tipped. Sophie gasped. Megan covered her mouth. Audrey's assistant took one step backward. Nathan caught the table edge with his palm, steadying himself before anything could fall onto his daughter. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the scrape of chair legs, the drip of coffee, and Sophie's purple crayon rolling across the floor. Then Nathan looked at the crayon, picked it up first, and placed it back in his daughter's hand, because even in humiliation, he knew what mattered most. The purple crayon rested back in Sophie's hand, but her fingers would not close around it. She stared at Nathan as if the whole world had tilted, and only his voice could make it level again. Travis Boone stood a few feet away, breathing through his nose, waiting for the anger that never came. That was what unsettled him most. He had shoved men before with words, with pressure, with titles, with the invisible weight of someone who believed the room belonged to him. Most people either shrank or snapped. Nathan Reed did neither. He rose slowly, coffee staining one sleeve, his face calm, his eyes clear, his palms open where Sophie could see them. "It is all right," he said softly. "No one is hurt." Travis scoffed. "That is right. No one is hurt. So maybe stop acting like a saint." Nathan did not look at him yet. He looked at Megan, who was frozen near the counter. "Are you okay?" Megan nodded, but her chin trembled. He looked at Martha. Did the hot coffee reach your shoes? Martha shook her head. Then he looked at Sophie. Breathe with me, sweetheart. In through the nose. Out slow. Audrey Blake watched the sequence with an expression she could not hide anymore. Nathan had checked on everyone in the room before himself. Not because cameras were raised. Not because she was there. Because that was the order of his soul. Travis noticed Audrey watching. Nathan, and jealousy flashed across his face like a match struck in a dark room. Enough, he said, stepping forward. You do not get to turn this into some little hero moment. Owen Pierce shifted from beside the door, ready now, his shoulders tightening beneath his dark jacket. But before Owen could cross the floor, Travis reached toward Nathan again, not with the force of a fight, but with the careless arrogance of a man used to moving people out of his way. Nathan moved only half a step. His hand met Travis's wrist, light as a warning, precise as a lock clicking into place. There was no struggle, no impact, no sound except the rain on the windows and the low hum of the espresso machine. Travis stopped because his own momentum had nowhere left to go. Nathan did not twist. He did not punish. He simply guided Travis's hand down and away, the way someone might close a door before a child saw what stood behind it. Please do not do that again, Nathan said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the cafe. Travis blinked, confused by the absence of pain, the absence of drama, the terrible embarrassment of being controlled without being attacked. Nathan released him immediately and stepped back, palms open again. Owen Pierce did not move now. His eyes had changed. He had seen men trained to intimidate, men trained to win, men trained to hurt. This was different. This was restraint built from discipline, the kind of control that usually came from years of learning how not to use power unless there was no other choice. Audrey leaned slightly toward Owen without taking her eyes off Nathan. Who is he? She asked under her breath. Owen answered just as softly. Not the man they told you he was. The cafe held that sentence like a secret. A phone lowered near the window. A spoon stopped against a mug. Even Travis seemed smaller, not because Nathan had made him small, but because truth had removed the costume from his pride. Sophie finally closed her fingers around the crayon. Nathan gave her the faintest smile, the kind a father gives when he is trying to say everything is safe before he is sure it is. And for the first time that afternoon, Audrey Blake looked at Harbor Light Cafe and saw not a failing property, but a room full of people waiting for someone with power to remember what respect looked like. Audrey Blake did not speak at first, and that silence was heavier than any question. She looked at Nathan Reed, then at Travis Boone, then at the faces around the cafe, faces that seemed to be asking her what kind of power she had brought through their door. Travis tried to laugh it off, but the laugh came out thin. That was a neat little trick, he said. Maybe he practices on people who cannot afford lawyers. Nathan's eyes flicked toward Sophie, and the warning in them was not anger. It was a boundary. Do not bring my daughter into this. Then maybe do not raise her in a failing cafe, Travis snapped. Sophie flinched, and that small movement did what no argument had done. It pulled something brave from inside her. She slid off her chair, clutching her drawing notebook to her chest, and walked toward Audrey with steps so careful the room seemed to count them. Nathan turned. Sophie, sweetheart, you do not have to. But she kept walking. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the wet floor where coffee had spilled. She stopped in front of Audrey and held up the notebook with both hands. My daddy is not what he says. Audrey lowered herself slightly, not enough to look childish, just enough to meet Sophie without making her feel small. What do you want me to see? Sophie opened to the first page. There was an old woman beside a blue sedan, and Nathan crouched by a tire in the rain. Mrs. Alden from Maple Street, Sophie said. Her tire went flat after church. Daddy fixed it, and would not take money because she only had grocery cash. She turned the page. A boy sat alone outside the cafe with a brown lunch bag. That is Caleb. He used to wait at the bus stop hungry. Daddy told Martha to put extra soup in a cup, and said it was accidentally made. Martha covered her mouth, and her eyes shone. Sophie turned another page. Megan stood under an umbrella, crying beside the back door. Nathan was drawn beside her with a toolbox. Miss Megan's car would not start when her little brother had a fever. Daddy fixed the battery. After work. He said family emergencies should not come with invoices. Megan looked down, tears slipping before she could hide them. The rain softened against the windows. The espresso machine gave one low breath behind the counter. The cafe was no longer watching a scene. It was remembering a man. Sophie turned one final page, slower than the others. It showed Nathan sitting at the kitchen table late at night, bills stacked beside him, his head bowed, one hand resting near a photograph of a woman with kind eyes. "That is my mom," Sophie whispered. "She is in heaven now. Daddy says grief is not an excuse to stop being good." Audrey's face changed then, not with pity, but with recognition, as if a locked room inside her had heard the right key. Travis